Good evening. This is Pastor Barbara, aka Preacher with Parrots. Today is January 28th, 2015. It's our Wednesday night program. We're in the book of Proverbs. We're not going to go verse by verse like we usually do, because we've hit some subjects that in the first 3 or 4 chapters we've already gotten the same subject a couple of times. So what I'm going to do is try to go through a couple of chapters tonight. And I've gone before and I've just underlined a few things that I want to mention. So I'm going to do some jumping around. After a short video, I'm going to close this one and do another one. This sounds kind of strange, but it does have to do with wisdom and foolishness. As does Proverbs 9, 10, 11, and 12. Well, the whole book of Proverbs. But I am going to talk about how to go about looking for a job, because I know a lot of people are, and a lot of people are having trouble. And there's ways to do it, and there's ways not to do it. And some of my regulars, they hear, my stories, my life experiences that become parts of my sermons. And it just might be helpful to some people, especially if you want to work for older people. I know all about what older people like when they're hiring somebody to work for them. And how some insignificant things can make a big difference, and how one small job, if you happen to work for somebody who has a lot of friends, can turn into a big thing. But right now, we're in Proverbs 10. I'm going to go to verses 4 and 5. Idle hands make one poor, but diligent hands bring riches. Here's something that you have to think about it for a minute before you catch on. The son who gathers during summer is prudent. The son who sleeps during harvest is disgraceful. Blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Let's go back to the one who gathers during summer is prudent. You don't gather crops during the summer. You plant in the spring. You water, you pray for rain and good weather in the summer. But you don't gather crops until autumn or fall. So why do we have the son who gathers during the summer is prudent when you don't gather during the summer? That means he's ready. He's got his stuff gathered. He's got his act together. He's ready to go. If he's needed, if something comes up, he's ready. Somebody not that anxious about his doing a good job for good old dad might not even show up in the summer, because you don't gather crops in the summer. But anybody who gathers during the summer, he's Johnny on the spot. He's ready to go. First thing that happens, first time he's needed, he's going to be there. The son who sleeps during harvest is disgraceful. Well, first of all, one of them is wide awake in the summer before he's needed, and the other during harvest, when he definitely is needed, is sleeping. That's downright disgraceful. I was a city girl. I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit. My dad was a country boy. You've heard about you can take the boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy. That was my dad. My mother was an orphan, and she was raised by her grandparents. She was already married to my dad, and I was born when her grandparents died. They took the little bit of money that the house sold for and divided it among all the children, and they gave my mother the portion that her father would have received if he had been alive. And I can't remember if it was $200 or $400, but it was in the 1930s. And that made a down payment on a house in the suburbs. The land was already plotted out. In some areas, there would be a whole block full of houses on both sides of the street, brand new houses. The block we lived in, there were not brand new houses. There would be blocks where there was nothing. I had to walk through the woods to go to school, even though, you know, a couple of blocks on either side there might be houses, but between my house and the school there wasn't. So I would go from one block to the other through the woods, and there'd be a street. I'd cross the street, go through another one block of woods. I can even remember when we had violets growing then in the summer. Really beautiful. Well, one of those one blocks wide, one block square, that there was nothing. I don't know how my dad managed it, but he planted. He planted things. Have you ever seen white radishes? They're long. They look like small carrots, or not so small carrots. He planted two kinds of radishes. He had potatoes, carrots, corn, green beans, peas. Around the house we had rhubarb. We had more stuff growing. And they bought mason jars, and he constructed in the basement of our house, put a little room and put shelves up. He taught my mother how to can. And we had a Missouri farm in the middle of Royal Oak, one of the suburbs of Detroit. I spent one summer when I was 10 with my grandparents. It was one of the last years. I went when I was 13. Grandpa was already off the farm. So this was one of the last summers that he worked as a farmer. A couple of my cousins, male boys, two boys, were older than me by 2 years. They could do all kinds of stuff because they were boys that I as a girl couldn't do. And they could do stuff because they were country. But while I was there, I learned to kill frogs either with a .22 rifle or with a stone. And Grandma would cook them for us. But they got to work on shocks. And there were machines that cut down the wheat or whatever the stuff was that was growing. And then my two cousins would, I think the men would gather them into piles, you know, pile here, another pile there. And my two cousins would wrap them up. All I got to do was, because you couldn't, I think my grandfather had a car, but I never saw it run. So I had to do this on a horse and remember with the country girl from Detroit. But it would take the time that I would get a gallon or two of water and get it to where the boys and the men were working and they would drink it. Then by the time I got back to the well and filled it up and got back, they were thirsty again. And that was my introduction. The little bit that I know about farming, that pretty much is it. Verse 9 says, well, let me back up to verse 8. A wise heart accepts commands, Nobody likes to be told what to do. I mean, we really don't. But if you're wise, you will allow people to tell you what to do. And if you're working for somebody, you better be able to take instruction. But foolish lips will be destroyed. Foolish people don't like to be told what to do. First of all, they think they already know what to do. And if you're working for somebody else, it doesn't make any difference what you think. It depends on what the guy you're working for thinks. The one who lives with integrity lives securely. But whoever perverts his ways will be found out. I was in my early 70s, I think. I'd been on the mountain here for a couple of years. Rose, who had been my partner in ministry and was like a sister to me, had been with me for 47. We'd been working together in the ministry for 47 years. And I remember after she passed away and was buried, I remember being down in a camp meeting. And somebody, because I've always worked in the Spanish-speaking churches, so I could be 5 miles away from an English-speaking church of the same denomination, and I don't know those people. And I ran into somebody, and he said, "Oh, I know about you. I have heard about your integrity." And I thought, that was a word that really wasn't in my vocabulary. I knew what it meant, but people didn't talk that much about integrity. But it's very important for Christians. It means you can be counted on. It means if you say something, it's the truth. People don't have to wonder, is it 10% true? Is it 90% true? If you have integrity and you say something, people know it's true. People also know they can count on you. We were going down in the car, and I was with a friend. Her husband had pastored the same church that I later pastored. It was an English-speaking church, the kind that I never attend. But because it's up here on the mountain, it's not all that easy to get a pastor for. And so we were familiar with some things. And the subject of came up. I was telling her, I said, "Did you know that my church called the cops on me one day?" The same church you and your husband pastored, they called the cops on me one day. And I was telling her about it. And Larry, you may remember, you may have heard me say this before. It was the Sunday that we changed clocks. And the Saturday night before, I had changed all the clocks in my house but one. And it was the one that's right above me now that I'm looking at. And I see that it's about 22 minutes to 8. And I had preached a couple Sundays before on Elijah. And some of the events, political events, like Israel becoming a nation, things like that. And then I was 36 years old when I went to Jerusalem. And it was during the war. So the original group I was going with wouldn't even go. Everybody was afraid to go to Jerusalem when they were having a war, but it was that famous 6-day war in 67. And I was telling about that. One of the things that tells us we're in the last days. So my congregation thought they would like to have an extra service. How many churches do you know that they say, Pastor, please, we'd like to have one more day of services in addition to Wednesday, in addition to Sunday? Could we have another day of services so you could teach us about the last days? And we had come up on Sunday afternoon. And they said to me that morning, you are going to be here at 5, right? And I said, right. And I was at home looking, and I happened to look up at that one clock that wasn't right and got my time messed up. So when the whole congregation was there at 5, I was here reading. So they called the cops, and they said, she doesn't come up Highway 18, she comes up Highway 189. Now you've got to go look for her because something is wrong. Because if she says, well, she's not like other people. Other people can say they're going to be someplace and they're not. But if she says she's going to be there, she's there. When I drove up at 20 off and they all came running out, because by this time they found somebody that had a key to the church, and oh man, it was a big deal. And I don't know if the cops were on their way looking for me or not. But there are other people that say they're going to be someplace and they're not. Nobody has anything. No. Okay, O2, I got your message. Come back when you can. Oh, you're talking about going to Jerusalem. I'm hoping to go in for my birthday because it will be right around Feast of Pentecost, and there's going to be something special there. Hoping to do it. It probably will be the last big trip I'll make in my life, but my doctor has said he thinks I can make the trip. 2 of my doctors have, and 1 more has to sign off on it. But at any rate, that's integrity. Can people count on you? You know, that's integrity. Wisdom is found on the lips of the discerning, but a rod is for the back of the one who lacks sense. Now, we don't spank children anymore in this country, so I'm told. I was reading something in Facebook the other day, and it said when I was a kid I got spanking, so I now suffer from something known as integrity or being responsible. The labor of the righteous leads to the activity of the labor of the righteous. I've got to move my Bible up where the light is shining on it. The labor of the righteous leads to life. The work that you do. The activity of the wicked leads to sin. The one who follows instruction is on the path to life. But the one who rejects correction goes astray. We have a lot in the book of Proverbs about instruction and correction. There is nothing wrong with making a mistake. Never met a person that doesn't make them. If you don't learn from them, you're not too bright. Correction is something, if you hope to improve, you better look for it. If you're doing a job for the first time, you've never done it before, you're probably going to need some correction. You're going to probably do some things wrong. Nothing wrong with trying and making a mistake. Somebody gives you correction. I remember a young couple. When I was 14 years old, they became my mentors. They, along with a couple of other people, were advantageous, helpful in getting me into Bible college when I was only 16. And they used to pay me a compliment. You may not see it as a compliment. They said I was teachable. I've been wanting to serve the Lord and be in the ministry since I can remember. So, obviously, if somebody is willing to promote me, to help me, I traveled with them. I met them early in the summer when I was 14. And whenever they were anywhere near where I lived, preaching a revival meeting, they would send me a bus ticket, and I became, in the summers and on weekends if they were in Michigan, the music for their revival crusades. They couldn't have children. They weren't that much older than me, maybe 15 years or so. But, you know, between age 15 and age 30, 15 years is a lot. Between age 70 and age 85, 15 years is not that much different. But how sad it would have been, having had the opportunities that they and other people gave me, if I hadn't taken advantage of them. And I wouldn't have had those if I wasn't willing to learn. Had I just assumed, as so many 14, 15, 16-year-olds do, that they know everything, I never would have had those opportunities. But I was very fortunate. You've got to know that you need to learn, and you've got to take advantage of opportunities to learn. Because if you don't, you lose out. In the same chapter, let me read verse 19. When there are many words, sin is unavoidable. I was talking to a friend not too long ago. We were talking about something, and I said, you know what? Say as little as possible. As a matter of fact, if you can get by with saying nothing, that would be preferable. If you're talking, everybody knows what you're thinking and everybody knows what you know. If you're listening, you know what the other people are talking about and thinking about and what they know. They don't have a clue about what you know. And that gives you, whether you're looking for a job, I don't care what the subject is, that puts you at an advantage. When you're the one that just talks, can't keep your mouth shut, you all know what it is to have certain advantages when you're playing certain sports. You tell everybody how fast you can run, and you can do this, and you do certain jumps and certain sides, but not from other sides of the hoop. You tell everything. You've lost the advantage. Sometimes it's best just to keep quiet. Learn. The lips of the righteous feed many. Sounds like somebody has a job in which they give directions and so forth. But fools die for lack of sense. You'd think that if you didn't know what, if you were new in a certain field of endeavor or something, didn't know something, that you'd be quiet about it. You've heard the saying, keep your mouth shut, and people will wonder if you know anything, or if you're dumb. Open your mouth, no more question whether you're a fool or not. The lips of a righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of sense. Here's about handling a crisis. When the whirlwind passes, the wicked are no more, but the righteous are secure forever. We have constantly crises in our lives. If not us, then our neighbors or our families or our loved ones. But the righteous are secure. The fear of the Lord promotes long life, but the years of the wicked are cut short. Why? Because they make bad decisions. I'm going to go to chapter 11 now. This comes back to integrity. I think you all that are, those of you watching the video on YouTube may not be aware of this. At the moment, I'm in the middle of a live broadcast. And I want to say to them, you have probably are all too young to know what it is to put your thumb on a scale. We go to a grocery store and we bought things that are already weighed and already got a price on them, and they're already wrapped up, and we pick up 4 pork chops or we pick up 2 pounds of hamburger or whatever. However, in many supermarkets where they have, in addition to prepackaged meat, they have other, you can ask for a certain amount of meat and they weigh it. Years ago, a person who did not have integrity you had a big scale, and you would put all your produce in the scale. And a person without integrity would put his thumb there. It would look like he's putting stuff in it, but as he's pushing down on the scale, it weighs a little bit more, so he's going to get a little bit more money. Well, I'm thinking about it. I need to accept a friend there. It's been a while ago, but I'm afraid if I don't do it while I'm thinking about it, I won't do it. Dishonest scales are detestable to the Lord. You see, the Lord cares whether we put our thumb on the scale and pretend that what's in the scale weighs more than what it really does. But an accurate weight is His delight. There's a verse you've all heard before, very well-known verse in the Bible. In fact, my regulars have heard me talking about pride and about people who think they know it all. In fact, I think one of the more recent videos that I've made, maybe the one on chapter 4 and 5 in Ephesians, speaks about those, especially those serving the Lord, who know it all. They think they're all that. And I think in one of those videos I mentioned, the Lord doesn't need people who know all that. who have it all, who know it all, who are so smart, they're so good, they're number one, they're at the top, everybody wishes they were them. The Lord really needs people working for Him who are willing to do what He wants them to do. Those who want to serve God, but they know exactly how to do it and don't tell them because they know. You can't serve the Lord that way. You have to be open yourself to the Lord's leading and open to the Lord's direction. I don't care if you've been, I'm in my 61st year of ministry. I was saved when I was 11. Went to Bible college when I was 16. Then got 2 university degrees. But I was still 23 when I entered full-time ministry and was a non-stop evangelist for 6 years and a half until I started teaching in one of our Bible colleges and then stopped traveling for a few years. You can't be a know-it-all. You have to be teachable. That was 61 years ago. There's still so much I don't know. And still so much I need the Lord to teach me. Hi, Citizen Smith. You must have made your comment just about the time I popped in. Have you been on my program before? I don't recall the name, and I'm pretty good. Delighted to meet you. Delighted to meet you, too. Oops, caps. That happens. I use caps occasionally on one word if I'm trying to make a point. Anyway, I'm glad to have you. Please make yourself at home. If you have questions or comments about what I'm talking about, which right now in the book of Proverbs is about wisdom, in a few minutes I'll be on another topic. But are you new also to the network or just to my program? Anyway, to this site. Okay. I'm Preacher with Parrots, as you know, because you had to click on my icon to get here. I've been known by that name for about 8 years. I used to be Preacher with Parrots. I used to be Pastor Barbara and the Bird Lady. And then when one network closed down, I went to another, decided to combine the two. Then a couple of networks later, because this is a business that is constantly in flux, it's constantly changing. And I used the name Pastor Barbara for a year or two, and anybody who knew who Barbara Shelton was, I mean, this was before everybody had a Facebook or a Twitter account. I had to go back to using Preacher with Parrots just so my old friends could find me. But welcome to the room. You are now in Lake Arrowhead, California. Enjoy yourself. When pride comes, and I've been following certain ministers who have had some type of failure in their ministry. Some serious, some not so serious, some well-known, others not well-known. But as a former teacher of ministers, it's something that distresses me. I would love a friend request. We keep in style with this. Let's see. At any rate, I'm not snooping around other people's lives, but I'm concerned. How can somebody that's been in the ministry 20, 30, 40, 50 years all of a sudden have a failure in their ministry? And what do they do after they have been a disappointment to others? And my regulars know that I've come to the conclusion, whatever the failure is, that's not where the failure really was. The failure is not wanting to have a high expensive lifestyle beyond what is reasonable for even the busiest minister. The problem isn't maybe they like the woman next door. Oh, it might come to that. But that's not the problem. The problem is pride. We have it in other parts of the Scripture. Pride comes before a fall, so we should know that. But as I do some research, and I do things like read court records and things like that. I'm a former court interpreter. And if I start researching something, I really research it. If you go back far enough, they thought they were all that. And while, as you say, none of us are exempt, I'm going to say exempt from temptation, because that comes before sin. There's a comment about not being exempt from sin. None of us, even Jesus, was exempt from temptation. You can be tempted and not sin. But the one who thinks they're all that, oh, I'm the best known preacher of this, that, the other. That leads to the rest. That may not be the fall that everybody hears about. That was the reason that God gave the Apostle Paul whatever was his thorn in the flesh, whatever disease, whatever situation it was brought on by Satan, not by God, but the Lord allowed it to keep Paul from thinking he was all that. And Paul was all that. Paul was a world traveler, the disciples, and didn't get out of Jerusalem. Maybe into Syria, right next door. Paul was a Roman citizen. Paul was a Pharisee and the son of a Pharisee. Paul was educated at the feet of the best teacher there was in the world at that time. And Paul was taken to the desert and received revelations face to face with the Lord, just as Moses did on Mount Sinai. If anybody ever had a reason to feel he was all that, it was Paul. But because the Lord knows that leads to a fall, the Lord allowed whatever that thorn in the flesh was. Well, let me go on to a few other things I have outlined here before I close this portion and go to another subject that I want to discuss, because I think it'll be helpful to a lot of the people that watch our videos. When pride comes, disgrace follows. But with humility comes wisdom. And I'll repeat for those of you that might be hearing me for the first time and haven't heard it before. Knowledge is what you know. Wisdom is what you use to make the choices that make or break you. Knowledge is what you know. Wisdom is what you do with what you know. I'm looking to try to determine which are the things that I underlined for this evening's programs and which were already underlined in my Bible. Here's one. A gossip goes around revealing a secret, but the trustworthy keeps a confidence. We all like to be the one who tells somebody something, especially if it's very important. I remember the night that Osama bin Laden was shot. That a dear friend of mine, it was Sunday evening, if I recall. I know I was on the air, and I was broadcasting. And as soon as I closed my program, got a phone call from somebody that had seen it on television and knew that, I wouldn't be on watching television at that time. We'd like to share something big with somebody. I can remember how I first learned when Kennedy was shot. I can remember when I heard certain things, certain people I wanted to tell them. It's something we like to share. But revealing a secret usually means hurting somebody. Somebody's counting on your confidence. But the trustworthy people can keep the confidence. Because it doesn't make any difference how much you want to reveal it. Gossip betrays confidence. You got it. If somebody, here we come, and in verse 15, something you've heard me talk about before, but let's do 14. Without guidance, people fall. But with many counselors, there is deliverance. There is nothing wrong with somebody who is a student, or you're a young minister, or you're young, learning what you're doing. There's nothing wrong with learning from a variety of people. You will learn some things from some people, and you will learn other things from other people. And to have a variety of counselors is good. That doesn't mean you're dumb and you need help. That means you're smart and you know you need help, because we all do. Here's something that we get at least every third chapter in the book of Proverbs. I've mentioned it already twice, and we're in chapter 11. If somebody puts up security for a stranger, he will suffer for it. But the one who hates such agreements is protected. Let me mention this if you haven't heard any of the other times I've mentioned it. I remember the first time somebody asked me to sign for a loan or something they wanted. I was teaching public school, which means I had a steady job and a salary. I had just bought a house because I had traveled in a trailer for so many years as an evangelist and lived in one while I was teaching at our Bible college for 30 years. And while I went back to school another year to get a teaching credential in California and work on my master's degree. I finally got around to buying a house. There was a woman, her husband left her. She had 5 sons. She was going to need help, financial help, for a long time. No man can support two families. Any man that leaves his family, and no man lives all by himself either. He's going to eventually have another family, and you have to be a pretty outstanding person if you can afford to support two families. She was, I hadn't figured it out at that time, but she was going to be a needy person. And she and I weren't that close, but she did go to my church, and she was really close to some very close friends of mine. And she said she needed a signature. And she said, I know you've got the credit because you just qualified to buy a house. Well, if you know, when you're buying a house, especially your first house, you need so much. It isn't like I owned a house and could trade it in for another house. I'd been living in a trailer for so long, and they lose value. Houses will gain in value usually, unless you're in a recession, but trailers go down in value. And then, of course, you're trying to furnish, and, you know, so many things. So I really didn't have the money. But that's one side of it. I didn't have the money, but supposing I had. I had met a Christian attorney. He was an ethicist. He, not only because he was an attorney, but because something's happening on my monitor. I hope I'm not having a problem recording this on YouTube. So it's really jumping around over there. I was very open with him and said, what is your take on this? What is your opinion on it? And of course, I was not that aware of everything that Proverbs had to say on it. But he said, you sign for somebody, you might as well count on making their payments. Because they don't come to you first. They first go to the bank. And the bank says, no, we can't lend it to you, usually because either they have bad credit or have not yet established good credit. If the bank doesn't lend, you go to another lending organization, which usually takes a bigger risk and charges more interest. If they don't lend to you, people go to someone else, because as I said, I was not a relative or a close friend. A number of people before you, thank you. My people on the broadcast are telling me that I'm on two different computers. That's why one computer is acting up. The one I'm using to record is acting up, but they're telling me that the one that I'm doing the broadcast on is fine. Thank you. Anyway, I came after thinking about it and praying about it and this has been my feeling, and this was back in the early 1970s. So from that time until now, my feeling is this. If they are worthy of money, in other words, they're not going to go drink it up or smoke it up or whatever. If they have an honest need, if it isn't because of laziness or something for which the need will always continue, because some people are always going to need money because they're not trustworthy, they're not reliable, they're going to need money until the day they die. And I can give it to them, then I do. There are times in my life that I can give somebody a couple $100, and there are times in my life that I can't afford it. I've gone through times not all that distant when my tithes were $20 a week. You can't run a household on that. You can't take care of yourself, much less somebody else. So, but if I can afford it, but if I can't give it to them, I can't afford to sign. Because signing for somebody else is that far short of making their payments. It is so likely that you're going to be making them. So if you can be a good Samaritan, be one. If you don't have it to give, you don't have it to sign. Because you will be likely paying it. Let me see if there was something else I really wanted to mention before I get out of this subject and go to the next one. 12:1, exactly what we've read before this. Whoever loves instruction loves knowledge. If you love knowledge, you want to be taught. But one who hates correction is stupid. People who need correction usually say, "Don't tell me, do I look stupid?" Well, probably they do. But there are ones who don't want correction. "Don't tell me what to do." Well, if you're working for somebody, they have every right to tell you what to do. And whether you're working for somebody or not, I've never turned down the opportunity to learn something. If somebody at school or at work or whatever says, "Hey, I'm going to be doing something over here. Y'all want to learn? You want to see what's going on?" Sure, why not? When I was working my way through college as a nurse, and a doctor would say, "Can you do this? Have you ever done this before?" I'd say, "Nope, but I'm willing to learn." And sometimes they're looking for somebody that knows how to do something, and I happen to know because somebody was teaching it one time, and I was anxious to learn. Learn everything you can. Good knowledge is never going to hurt you. It's always good. Here's one that I'm a firm believer. You all know that. But it's true. A righteous man cares about his animal's health, but the merciful acts of the wicked are cruel. Anybody that will kick an animal, anybody that will acquire an animal because there's times they want the friendship and affection of an animal, but then they can't take care of that animal when the animal needs care, like leave it out in the rain, leave it out in the snow. Some of the things that some people do to animals, if you can do that to an animal who has shown you nothing but love, what can you do to people who aren't always as receptive and as loving as an animal? You don't have to be an animal lover, but if you have an animal, take care of it. I've known people that want an animal when they want it, but when they're through with it, they get rid of it. Some of those same people ask me, "What arrangements have I made for my birds, when I'm not here any longer?" You better believe that I look at things like that. A righteous man is careful in dealing with a neighbor, but the ways of a wicked man lead them astray. A lazy man doesn't roast his game. We're talking about a hunter. But to a diligent man, his wealth is precious. Some people don't take care of what they have. It cost somebody something. A wise man hears his father's instruction, but a mocker doesn't listen to rebuke. The one who guards his mouth protects his life. I'm going to close here, and I'm going to close this video, because in a moment we're going to start another one, and it has to do with another kind of wisdom. But I have some suggestions for people that are looking for a job. So if that's you, look for the next video. But in the meantime, we're closing this one. And until the next time, blessings on you.